Διαπιστώνουμε είναι ότι κάθε ενότητα που έχουμε στο Greek Economic Summit είναι ουσιαστικά ένα ολόκληρο συνέδριο. Και δυστυχώς δεν έχουμε το χρόνο για να αναλύσουμε και να συζητήσουμε σε βάθος τα θέματα που προγραμματεύεται κάθε ενότητα. Προχωράμε γρήγορα στην επόμενη ενότητα. Συγγνώμη. The rise of automation, transforming manufacturing, shipping and supply chains. Τροφοδοτική αλυσίδα, αυτοματισμός, ναυτιλία, μεταφορές. Ο κύριος Δημήτρης Τιμοθέου, Αντιπρόεδρος Supply Chain Europe P&G της Procter & Gamble. Ο κύριος κύριος Chryssos Kavounides, Managing Director and Partner της BCG στην Αθήνα και Head. Και ο κύριος Σταμάτης Fradelos, ABS Vice President Regulatory Affairs. Ο κύριος Fotis Fotinos, Director Journalist metaforespress.gr. Κύριε Φωτεινέ, έχετε το λόγο. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ και όλους εσάς που συμμετέχετε.
Good afternoon to all. I'm Fotis Fotinos, Director of metaforespress.gr. The topic of our panel is the rise of automation, transforming manufacturing, shipping, and supply chain. We'll talk about digitalization, automation in industry, supply chain, and shipping. We have distinguished guests with us, Mr. Dimitris Timotheou, Vice President Supply Chain, Procter & Gamble, Mr. Chryssos Kavounides, Manager Director and Partner Head of BCG Athens Boston Consulting Group, and Mr. Stamatis Fradelos, ABS Vice President Regulatory Affairs. We'll start with Mr. Timotheou. So, Mr. Timotheou, how do you see the importance and role of supply chain in a consumer goods company, and how does Procter & Gamble see the role of artificial intelligence and data as an enabler for a resilient supply chain?
Okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much for the invite. So let me start because there are like two topics, right? The role of supply chain and then how do we utilize data and digitization. Let me start with the first one about the role of supply chain. I'm working in the supply chain for more than 20 years, so I guess I'm not going to surprise anybody if I say that I believe that the role of supply chain is important. Specifically in the consumer goods industry, where if you think about it, our objective is simply to produce products of high quality and then deliver them to our consumers at the time they need it, where they need it, and in a way that creates value for the company and for the consumers, right? So the role of supply chain is critical, and it has become even more evident how critical it is during the pandemic, right? And post-pandemic, because every single company had to face a number of disruptions, from raw and pack material shortages to capacities in the ocean freight or in the land transportation to availability of workforce. So it became really, really evident that companies that had already invested beforehand on creating what we call synchronized, end-to-end synchronized and resilient supply chains, they immediately were enjoying a competitive advantage, okay? And in Procter & Gamble, I would say that supply chain is a central part, not of a disciplinary strategy of, of the supply chain function as per se, but is a central part of the corporate strategy. We have a framework, we don't have a lot of time, we call it Supply 3.0, which really is embedded in the center of the corporate strategy, because we know that if we have a resilient and competitive supply chain, we will be able to achieve our corporate objectives. Now, moving to the second part, which is about, digitization, automation, and artificial intelligence. I've heard the panel before, and I think that I'm not saying something very radical if I say that the rise of automation and digitization is transforming the industries across the globe in ways that we haven't seen for decades. Yeah? And in Procter & Gamble, our focus, and we're working very intentional on this one, is how we can create what I would call a digital architecture a la AI factory. So you have tons of data, you have the right digital architecture, and then you develop and deploy algorithms that allow you, to achieve your objectives. And actually, the very important thing is how do you make sure that this digital architecture becomes embedded fully and a central part of your operating strategy. We are really working across the ecosystem of workflows with the end objective to be able to move to a mode of touchless operations. Now, I want to give a couple of examples. I know we don't have time, right?
Okay.
There is a number of manufacturing sites across the globe where we're implementing what we are calling unattended shifts. Unattended shifts, again, without going to the details, means that we are running shifts, normally or mainly the night shifts, with zero human supervision. This is, of course, enabled by data, by algorithms, by digital infrastructure, and provides huge competitive advantage both in the area of productivity, but also boosts employee well-being, right? Because it's an enabler for us to be able to move in our manufacturing sites on what we call 4 days week. There are other processes like demand planning. For the people that are working on supply chain, I mean, for years, we're putting many people to work on demand planning, very capable people, and we're ending up looking at each other and saying, you know what, the forecast is always wrong, which was the case, right? So with that in mind, what is changing, and it's changing rapidly, again, proprietary algorithms, extensive use of data, touchless demand planning, unattended demand planning operations, which provides productivity benefits and huge forecast accuracy improvements. The list goes on and on. We don't have time, right? I would finish saying that, in my mind, digitization, artificial intelligence is not really what someone would call a set of fancy, nice, sexy tools that let's go and adopt. It's a new reality. It's really transforming the operating strategies of the companies. And since we speak in English, the train has left the station. So the time for debate has passed, and now it's time for action.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Timotheou. Now we proceed with Mr. Kavounides. So, Mr. Kavounides, how are technological advancement transform the production and transportation of goods? What are the benefits?
Yeah, so we're seeing technology really transforming. The speed of technology is phenomenal. We heard the panel just before talking about artificial intelligence and the benefits, and this is transforming both how we manufacture, but also how we transport goods and how they end up in our homes and in our businesses. There's a number of technologies we could discuss and deep dive, from virtual reality to drones, which we see already in logistics, for example. We can talk about advanced robotics in manufacturing and so on. I would focus on 3 technologies. One is AI. And a great example, you mentioned demand forecasting. We see AI being a huge improvement in demand forecasting, for example. It is able to model the scenarios, far bigger data sets, and improve up to 30%, for example, the accuracy of forecasting of demand. This means significant savings in inventory for businesses. It also means for customers fewer stockouts when products are not on the shelves. A second technology which we see increasingly with the increase of computing power, etc., is digital twins. So where we digitally model end-to-end our processes, or our whether it's a manufacturing process or operations, or in fact end-to-end our supply chain, for example. And this allows us to model very quickly far more scenario, and it allows us to de-risk, for example, our supply chains. It allows us to understand changes in our operating models and how it will affect different parts of our model. And even from a planning perspective, in a manufacturing environment, this means that we can reduce our planning time by 50%, for example. So that means far faster uptime, much more significant uptime, much less lead time to plan things. And the third one, which we've been discussing for many, many years, but I think as AI comes on board, as computing power has increased, and we're looking now at even more advanced computing technologies like quantum computing, is Internet of Things. And I think it's made its way into our lives a lot more than we realize. But this is the real-time monitoring of what's going on, whether this is our production, where we monitor real-time our production. It allows us to do predictive maintenance. It allows us to optimize our operations in real time, and so on, which all have benefits. But even from a tracking perspective, and knowing you'll probably talk about shipping in a minute, we're seeing major shipping companies adopting real-time tracking, monitoring of the cargo, which improves the quality of cargo when it arrives. It reduces spoilage. It allows adjustment of the conditions during the voyage. It also allows very basic stuff like knowing what time the courier is going to arrive. This is all parts of Internet of Things. So 3 technologies which are hugely disruptive in driving forward how industry works and how it brings the products ultimately to our tables or to our homes.
Thank you, Mr. Kavounides. Now we switch to shipping. Mr. Fradelos, as automation reshapes the shipping and supply chain landscape, How do you see it, alternative traditional business models, and what strategies should companies adopt to stay competitive in this rapidly evolving environment?
Thank you for the question, and Kalispera. Good afternoon to everyone. So, indeed, shipping is a little difficult on chains. It's quite slow, but recently we have started using this term mentioned previously here about the Internet of Things, digital twins, artificial intelligence. So this is coming into our industry. We see already a switch to technology-driven ecosystem. So we have seen the previous years they started, installing sensors, developing the information technology on board the ships in order to start gathering data. Then they start gathering a lot of data. They didn't know what to do with it. Now they are trying to find and to implement new digital tools like artificial intelligence, machine learning, in order, to be able to gain some efficiency and improve their operations. We see also now they have the capacity of using cloud application to store the data. So this causes a decentralization of the operation because they have access in different locations. They have access in this data. We have seen also a change in terms of their workforce and the skills. Now we have different skills required, mainly in managing the data and the automation systems. So gradually we see these changes in our business model. We see also a lot of cooperation because with partnerships and cooperation, you can reduce your cost and your cost and your risk. What I would advise is that they should continue to explore and invest on these new technologies. We are doing also as an organization, as American Bureau of Shipping, we invest a lot of these new technologies, especially on artificial intelligence. We're trying to develop new digital tools to support our customers. So this is something that we would advise our clients, ship operators to do. Invest also on new skills for their people. This is also important to be able to, to cope with these new technologies. Data-driven culture, this is an important to collect the data, to have the systems, to analyze the data, and to have insights for informed decisions and continuous improvement. And of course, they need to have this data exchange and platforms and way to communicate this data with other partners.
Thank you, Mr. Fradelos. We return to AI and Mr. Timotheou. While AI is a hot topic across the industry, how about skills requirement in the age of AI? Is that a focus area for you? And if yes, how do you approach it?
Yeah, I think it was already mentioned a couple of times, right? The need for new skills. And I would start, there is a big discussion and there is a big fear around all this revolution on digital automation, artificial intelligence, about the role of humans, right? The role of humans, I'm pretty positive about this, and I'm just very positive, is not going to diminish. Is it going to change? Yes, it's going to change, absolutely, right? So humans that are performing what we call repetitive tasks are going to be less and less. At the same time, the role of humans is going to be even more critical and more central on what we call the decision-making process, right? So humans will continue creating value and driving progress, but in a different way. And this means that companies will face, and are facing as we speak, two main challenges. Challenge number one, how do we redesign our hiring strategies and what are the new skills that we are targeting? And challenge number two, how do we make sure that we accelerate in the area of education, training, and upskilling of our existing workforce? Yeah? Now, as an example, again, from my experience and from the company that I'm working in, we are working very, very intentionally for a number of years on the upskilling of our existing workforce. We're working on programs of providing what we call citizen developers type of skills, right, across the organization, meaning that people are equipped more and more with low coding skills in order to create applications for their own personal productivity and for the productivity of their teams. But even more importantly, the work has started at identifying which are the specific new skills and profiles of people that we need for the roles for the next 5 and 10 years. And this is a very interesting piece of work because you have skills that are evident, I would say, right? Like ability to work with Gen AI or prototyping or data analytics and insights. But there are also other soft skills, as an example, personal productivity, focused attention, which are very, very critical in order to be able to succeed in this new world that lies ahead of us. And again, to bring some optimism in the room, because I know that this subject sometimes can be a little bit depressing and, create some fear. These new skills and these new profiles, we already identified them in many countries, including our own country, Greece. In the last year, we have made a big investment at the regional level, at the European level, and we created a hub, right? A command center. We call it Warehousing Center of Excellence. In very simple terms, we have identified all the indirect activities that are happening across all our warehouses, all our distribution centers in Europe, and we have consolidated them in a hub located in Athens. So it's a new organization that is, in reality, in essence, running the warehouse operations across Europe. Two things were important for this one. One, technology, development, deployment, and adoption of sophisticated algorithms and artificial intelligence. And two, highly skilled and highly educated workforce that is going to work seamlessly with the technology. And this is what the two things that we have managed to identify in Greece, and that's why we have decided to choose Athens, Greece, as the place for this really new age, let's say, organization. And I think that this is the future when you look at organizational design, new skills, upskilling, and hiring.
Nice to hear that Procter & Gamble is still investing in Greece. Thank you very much. Mr. Kavounides, how can technology help mitigate geopolitical risk and ensure supply chain resilience?
Yeah, I'll keep it very short. I think all companies need to be looking at the volatility that they face in geopolitically at the moment. I think it's not just a supply chain issue, but supply chain issues are very directly affected. I think going back to what we were discussing earlier, if you look at AI, it provides fantastic opportunities, putting the modeling in place to be able to run scenario and really understand how your business will be impacted at a scale and the level of detail that wasn't possible before. And you run those scenarios, and ultimately you need to place your bets and strategically how you develop your supply chain to be resilient to potential situations. The other element is leverage the digitization end-to-end of your supply chain, of the ecosystem you're building as much as possible, so that switches in terms of the speed of switching your supply chains and the loads of different suppliers and routings is as fast as possible, and you leverage the digitization element as much as possible to be able to make those changes. So those would be two examples, very quickly.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fradelos, the last question for you. How can automation in the IMO, Single Maritime Window Initiative, transform port logistics operations, and what measures are needed to ensure interoperability and efficiency across diverse global ports?
Thank you for the question, and especially mentioning the single maritime window, because this year was a milestone for our industry with amendments in the facilitating convention. The single maritime window became mandatory for ports, so this is a standardization in terms of communication. It's a platform and protocol for communication of ports with the ships. And this will bring great efficiencies. Just to have an indication, with the conventional way, the ships have to prepare a lot of paperwork, hard copies, in order for the arrival at the port, at berth, the clearance of the ship, and then the departure. During a recent study, on average, the captain needs around 3 hours to prepare this paperwork. And we have around 4.6 million port visits from ships every year. So you understand the efficiency and the gains if we we can have this operation digitalized and perform automatically. So we have a platform with same protocol that the ship communicates with the port. And of course, we have the automation you mentioned in order to process this data and complete the work in real time. So this is very important. And in order this to be further enhanced and to gain more efficiencies, we need, of course, to develop infrastructure on different ports because infrastructure is still not available in many places in the world. We need to look also into the cybersecurity part because we have a lot of data and we need to make sure that we mitigate any risk. Of course, we need skills, as we mentioned previously, for the people to be able to operate and manage these systems, and a cooperation between different stakeholders for a smooth implementation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You gave us a general picture of supply chain challenges. And now we have the break for lunch. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.